Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of our Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows Group. And this is a podcast where I interview thought leaders, CTOs, industry experts, ideally asking them a bit about their story, stuff they're passionate about, and that all-important career advice to many of our STEM graduates. So I'm really pleased to have Michael Zucker with me today. Michael is the Director of Engineering at Zoopla. For many of our UK listeners, they'll know Zoopla. It's one of the fastest growing or biggest real estate online platforms and a very, very successful business in their own right. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate that.
And so let's jump straight in and hear a bit about your story. How did you get into tech?
Yeah, sure. You know, my background is somewhat ordinary, although my journey to get to where I am today is a little untraditional, and I'm happy to talk about both. Yeah, I have a pretty standard upbringing in tech in that I graduated from university with degrees in business and computer science. And shortly after that, decided to pursue a career as a programmer rather than go the traditional route of marketing, finance, accounting. And early in my career out of university, I went towards big tech, right? Or what was big tech then? It was a company called Sun Microsystems. So they were the ones that started the Java programming language. Most people now know of them as Oracle, because Oracle purchased Sun a number of years ago. And after 3 years at Sun, this was sort of the late 90s, early 2000s, I decided to try my hand at a startup. I was really envious of all the people in Silicon Valley getting rich and startups and whatnot. So I went to the startup life. I worked my butt off, evenings, weekends, gave it my all, and then the entire company went bankrupt and we all lost our jobs. And so at that point, I decided to go into consulting, actually. And this is where I think my path diverges from a lot of other people. I thought to myself, if I'm ever going to work that hard or that long, again, someone's going to have to pay me by the hour. And especially in America, where you only get 2 weeks of holiday per year. And the consulting route allowed me a bit more flexibility as well, right? So I could, work 3 months, 6 months, take a few weeks off, work 3 months, 6 months, take a month off. So I went into consulting and I spent about 12 plus years consulting as a senior software engineer, primarily in enterprise Java applications, both individually, and also got to a point where I was hiring other consultants to work underneath my consultancy. So I would bid on a project, bring in myself and 3, 4 other people, and we would deliver a project in 6 months or a year, or whatever it was. And one interesting note about my 12 plus years as a consultant is about 6 of those years, I only worked 6 months of the year. I only worked half time. And the reason for that is because I was coaching ice hockey sport. Not very popular here in the UK, but it was very popular in America and Canada. And so I was really passionate about coaching ice hockey. I was able to move around the US, coaching both university and semi-professionally during the fall and winter months. And then spring and summer during the off season, I would go back to software engineering and pick up projects and clients and code for 6 months. After that, I spent about 9 years in engineering management. I'm about 23, 24 years into my career at this point. I spent about 9 years in engineering management and leadership roles across a bunch of different industries, manufacturing and cable and publishing, travel and property or real estate, which is where I continue my career today at Zoopla.
And what a story. That's fantastic, showing actually that balance, that quality of life or balance, to be able to do 6 months on, 6 months off, have the confidence in your skill set, I guess, to know what's important to you, because some might say you're ahead of your time, because it's taken the rest of the world, or the majority of us, a pandemic to realize actually you need to be able to balance stuff and enjoy life whilst also working hard. And I guess it took you a startup that went wrong to realize, hold on, there's more to life than working every hour God sends.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I loved and still love programming and software engineering, but ice hockey had always been a passion. And I thought, why not give it a shot? This was before I had a family, before I had children, and it was just me, so it was much easier. And so, like I said, moved around a bunch, lived in 4 or 5 different cities at random points coaching different teams, and always sort of went back to Seattle in the off season because there's a ton of tech in Seattle, as you may know.
Yeah, fantastic. And so let's move on and over this 23-year history, career history to date, and there's many more ahead of us. What has really risen in your mind when you think, what gets you out of bed in the morning, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have a lot of passions. And when I think about the listeners of your podcast and STEM in particular, and people sort of starting out their careers, I think one of the things I'm most excited about are the advances we've made in cloud computing over the years. Obviously, AWS, Azure, IBM, these companies have had cloud computing platforms for quite some time now. And most of them are relatively comparable. I mean, the last several organizations I've been with, we've been all AWS. But the thing is, about the new graduates, I believe the boot camps and universities do a good job, if not a great job, of teaching language fundamentals, engineering competencies, frameworks, data structures, and algorithms. Although the big picture of productionalizing an application, right, taking an application from development into production, deploying it to the cloud, scaling it using CDN so that users all over the globe can access it, securing it, against attacks, and attacks certainly happen. Monitoring it, there's been some incredible services and tools that have been rolled out in the market to make engineers our lives much easier in each of these areas, and that really excites me. So along those lines, I guess my advice to new graduates is, yes, learn the data structures and algorithms, and learn the basics coming out of university or boot camp. But also start looking at Cloud 101 type of online courses. There's a ton of them out there, most of them for free, actually. And start familiarizing yourself with terminology and technology involved in these various platforms. So that's number one. I think the second thing that I'm really passionate about is people. I don't think you can do what I do without being passionate about people. I line manage 6 engineering managers now. And just, I have extremely qualified, extremely driven, extremely professional people that I'm fortunate enough to line manage. And I have to be at my best and on my A game. And within their management structures, so I have about 45 people on my team in total. And so for me, I spend a lot of time, a ton of time, reading posts on Medium and LinkedIn, everything from remote and hybrid working, employee retention, coaching, motivational techniques, you name it, I consume it. So I would say between Medium, LinkedIn, and something called Blinkist, I'll tell you about in a sec, I consume, I would say 5 to 10 pieces of content per day just on people. So I discovered an app a while back called Blinkist. And Blinkist is very cool, and I don't work for them, so I don't get any money for this. It basically summarizes some of the more popular leadership books. There's a million great leadership books out there, and there simply aren't enough hours in the day to read all of them. But Blinkist basically summarizes them for you and breaks them down in either small, easy to read chapters, or short sort of podcasty type of summaries where you can just listen to them. So like I said, for me, technology, cloud, people, constantly learning, constantly growing, constantly developing.
Yeah. And thank you for that. I mean, I'll make sure we follow up on the Blinkist, because that you're so right that we should always be learning, and culture and people is more than presuming that everyone has a paycheck so they're happy, or everyone's got a job so they're happy. We really have to understand fundamental drivers of the individual, not just presumption, I guess. And I get so knowing that you deal with, you line manage 6 very, very motivated and talented line managers and the team of 45. How do you work with, thinking about graduates coming in and knowing that they respond to different management styles? How do you change, or do you change your management styles based on the individual and what gets the best out of them?
Yeah, so yes is the short answer to your question. Is you absolutely have to change your management style depending on who you're managing. I think the old days of the supervisor walking the factory floor, and we don't function like that, nor should we, for that matter. So, you know, mm, naturally, the best managers are the best listeners, and I think in order to truly understand the best, and they ask the best questions on top of that. So the one way to get the most out of your people is to really customize and tailor your management approach depending on your people. And what I found is, and certainly with my team now, some people like to get into it and talk nuts and bolts, and some people just kind of want to shoot the breeze and hang out and catch up, and yeah, we'll get to work, but the conversation isn't really about that. And for them, the time with me, our one-on-one time, is more of a break from work, and they need that sort of place where they can vent and feel safe and know it's okay, rather than feeling like they need, they're being held accountable for something or responsible for delivery some status update. So very much agree with tailoring your management style. And if I turn that on its head, and again, advice to STEM graduates, or anybody for that matter, is you need to own the relationship with your line manager. Meaning, if there's something specific that works well for you, or you think might work well for you, that's what you need to bring to your line manager, and own the one-on-one meetings. I very much, we very much have an expectation that when I show up to a one-on-one meeting, I'm pretty quiet. Like, it's their meeting. Whatever they want to talk about, that's what we talk about. So I would encourage anyone to sort of own their one-on-one meetings as well. And if there's something specific that works for them or doesn't work for them, to feed that back to their line manager, because we're all just doing the best we can.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice. And that one-on-one time, and like you say, being able to, emotional intelligence goes a long way in this, doesn't it? Being able to actually pick up on what that person needs right then, and whether that is well, let's actually put work to one side for now, and let's talk about you, that all the way through to the other side where people want to lose themselves in work, and so, well, look, let's just talk about the projects and keep your mind on track.
Yeah, there's a great quote that I heard years ago, and ironically, I heard it during my ice hockey coaching days, nothing to do with software at all, or corporate world, but still very much relevant. And this was about coaching kids at the time, and the kids, they were late teens. And the saying was, these kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's very true, even with adults and even with professionals, and on my team specifically. So, I know there's a popular book out there called Radical Candor, which says, hey, be honest and upfront and straightforward with people, which is great. But radical candor still only works when they know that you do deeply care, that you're deeply empathetic to whatever they're going through, and very much invested in them as people. So, my advice is, learn your people, relate to your people, empathize with your people, and genuinely, care about you. For me, it's quite easy. I'm a pretty caring individual anyway. So for me, that comes very naturally. But I think once you've established that rapport and that relationship, and they know that you genuinely care, working with someone becomes much, much easier.
Yeah. Michael, what great bit of advice, and that quote is going to resonate. I think I'll make sure that's put on one of the lines, I think, in when we're talking about this podcast, because that really does stand out. And so the last section, and you've already covered so much of it, but is there any other bits of career advice? So thinking about our listeners, and in the UK, September's around the corner for the next year when they start looking to get into the market. Any last bits of advice you've got for people trying to get a footstep into the world of tech?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll parallel it to right now we have apprentices at Zoopla. They've been with us for about 15 months. Their apprenticeship is coming to an end, and a number of them are sort of going out into the industry. And I've had a number of these conversations over the past few weeks of, they're starting their careers, right? They've done their time with us, and now they're moving on. And over the past few weeks, I think my advice to them has been pretty consistent, which is challenging them and asking them to put deep thought into not only the type of technology or language they want to work in, but specifically the type of company they wish to join, right? The type of industry that excites them, et cetera. Have a story, try to have a story and a good reason, a solid reason when you're asked, why do you want to come here and work for Zoopla or Facebook or Spotify or Deliveroo or a startup, with 6 people? And so have something behind that. I think most people just starting out, they may not know exactly what they want, and that's okay. Some will definitely know or definitively know they want to work for a cool startup company in music, or others will definitely prefer the prestige of big tech. They want to be at Spotify or Facebook. But I'd say, as you're going through this interview process, it's really important. There's an old saying, which is, be careful who you hitch your wagon to, right? And what that means is, when you're going through these interview processes, they're interviewing you. Yes, of course, will you be a good fit for the team? Will you, be a culture add, et cetera? But it's really important that these people also interview back. And like I said, when I say be careful who you hitch your wagon to, make sure that the person or persons you'll be working under from a management or leadership perspective, that feel confident that they're as invested in your growth and your development as you are. Because, I was going to say the worst thing that could happen is getting into a company and, your management or your manager doesn't have the time of day for you. And therefore your career growth will really be stunted, as opposed to you find someone, a tech lead, person that, you're working underneath or paired with, or a buddy, and all of a sudden they're very much invested in you. There's exponential gains that can be had, especially early in your career. So the summary of that is, make sure you take a job where you feel confident you're working underneath someone that is really invested in your development and your growth.
And I couldn't agree with you more on that. I really couldn't agree with you more on that. And that's a great bit of advice to our STEM graduates, but also to anyone listening who's wanting to employ or hire graduates, because it doesn't matter what career level people are, it has to start from the minute someone joins the business, that they feel like they're being listened and they feel like people care, and then they'll thrive. And you build those high performing teams. So Michael, thank you. That's that time has flown by, as they always do when I speak with people like yourself. And thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure, Charlie. Thank you again. I really appreciate it.
And so to all of our listeners, that's another episode of the Future Tech podcast. The podcast is now on 33 of our university partner websites, career portals, along with our Spotify channel and the Arrows podcast webpage. For everyone listening, that's another show, and I hope you found that as informative as I have. Another big thank you to Michael for taking up his time to be with us today. And to all our listeners, here's to next week.